Sacred geography is nothing more than deciphering hidden codes in the landscape. But many different cultures hid the codes in different ways. And we're going to discuss the location of sacred sites according to regional configurations of this sacred geography. Now, throughout the ages, many cultures have conceived of geographic space and expressed those conceptions in a variety of ways. One expression of these conceptions has been by the establishment of sacred geographies. Now, for this introductory podcast, sacred geography may be broadly defined as the regional and even global geographic locating of a sacred place according to various mythological, symbolic, astrological, geodesic, and even shamanic factors. So in this podcast, we are going to briefly discuss examples of each of these kinds of sacred geographies, especially for the new listener. Now, perhaps the oldest form of sacred geography, and the one that has its genesis in mythology, is that of the Aborigines of Australia. According to Aboriginal legends in the mythic period of the beginning of the world, known as the dream time, ancestral beings in the form of totemic animals and humans emerged from the interior of the earth and began to wander over the land. And as these dream-time ancestors roamed the earth, they created features of the landscape through such everyday actions as birth, play, singing, fishing, hunting, marriage, and death. And at the end of the dream time, these features hardened into stone, and the bodies of the ancestors turned into hills, boulders, caves, lakes, and other distinct landforms. These places, such as Uluru, which we now know as Ayers Rock, and Katajut, or the Olgus Mountains, became these sacred sites. The paths the totemic ancestors had trod across the landscape became known as dreaming tracks, or even song lines. And they connected the sacred places of power. The mythological wanderings of the ancestors thus gave the Aborigines a sacred geography, a pilgrimage tradition, and the nomadic way of life for more than 40,000 years, making it the oldest continuing culture in the world, in fact. The Aborigines followed the dreaming tracks of their ancestors. Now, during the course of the yearly cycle, various Aboriginal tribes would make journeys called walkabouts along the songlines of various totemic spirits, returning year after year to the same traditional routes. And as people trod these ancient pilgrimage routes, they sang songs that told the myths of the dream time and gave travel directions across the vast desert to other sacred places along the song lines. At the totemic sacred sites were dwelt the mythic beings of dreamtime. The Aborigines performed various rituals to invoke the Kurumba, or the spirit power of the place. This power could be used to benefit the tribe, the totemic spirits of the tribe, and the health of the surrounding lands as well. And for the Aborigines, walkabouts along the songlines of their sacred geography were a way to support and regenerate the spirits of the living earth, and also a way to experience a living memory of their ancestral dreamtime heritage. Now, another example of sacred geography, deriving from the realm of the symbolic, may be found in the landscape mandalas of Japanese Shingon Buddhism. Now, these mandalas were used as aids in meditation by both Hindus and Buddhists. Mandalas in general are geometric arrangements of esoteric symbols or symbolic representations of the abodes of various deities, drawn or painted on paper, cloth, wood, or metal, and gazed upon by meditators. Mandalas are normally no more than a few square feet in size. And on the Ki Peninsula in Japan, however, Shingon Buddhism projected mandalas over enormous geographic areas from as early as the 11th century AD. Now, these mandalas are considered to be sacred representations of the residence of Buddha. These landscape mandalas produced a sacred geography for the practice and realization of Buddhahood. The mandalas were projected upon a number of pre-Buddhist Shinto and Buddhist sacred mountains, and the practice of monks and pilgrims was to travel from peak to peak in order to venerate the Buddhas, or bodhisattvas, residing on them. Just as a meditator would enter a painted mandala through visual concentration upon it, a pilgrim to the landscape mandalas of the Ki Peninsula would enter the mountains, thereby entering the realm of the Buddha. The passage through the landscape mandalas was made according to a specific and circuitous route. Ascents of the sacred mountains were conceived of as metaphorical ascents through the world of enlightenment, with each stage in the long walking pilgrimage representing a stage or process through the realms of existence conceived by Buddhism. Now, another fascinating form of sacred geography was practiced in ancient China, and it was called feng shui. In Chinese, it was a mixture of astrology, topography, landscape architecture, yin-yang magic, and Taoist mythology. And one of the first Westerners to study feng shui, the 19th century Christian missionary E.J. Idle, commented, "The Chinese look upon nature not as dead or an inanimate fabric, but as a living, breathing organism. They see a golden chain of spirited life running through every form of existence and binding it all together, as in one living body. Everything that subsists in heaven above or on earth below is connected." Now, this living spirit or life force is originally called qi, and it was believed to manifest in three forms: one that circulates in the atmosphere, one in the earth, and another that moves through the human body and also the bodies of animals. Now, the practice of acupuncture was concerned with the study and stimulation of qi within the body, while feng shui was concerned with the study and use of terrestrial qi, or sacred geography. Now, beginning as early as 2000 BC, the Chinese were conducting skilled topographic surveys and interpreting landforms according to the beliefs of Taoist mythology and astrology. And by the Ming Dynasty, which lasted from 1368 to 1644, all of the China south of the Great Wall had been organized into a vast sacred geography. Mountainous regions were believed to have vigorous rushing qi, while flat and monotonous land had sluggish, slow-moving qi. Now, feng shui which literally means wind, water, was the practice of harmonizing the chi of the land with the chi of human beings for the benefit of both. Now, temples, monasteries, dwellings, tombs, and even seats of government were established at places with an abundance of good chi. And at certain sites, varying degrees of landscape alteration would be undertaken to further improve the presence and movement of the chi. This is mind-blowing. Even hills would be contoured or truncated, and the course of rivers would be changed in order to produce the best energetic conditions for various human activities. Now, these naturally occurring power places that were structurally altered by humans became some of the primary sacred sites in all of China. Now, this delineation of sacred geography and the ensuing practice of large-scale landscape architecture astonished the first Europeans visiting China. Having neither a similar tradition nor a term to describe feng shui, early Western writers dubbed it geomancy. While this term has lately gained a certain popular currency, it is an incorrect use of the word. The word geomancy literally means earth divination, geomancy, and is believed to have been coined by Pliny the Elder when he met a group of mystics who tossed stones on the ground and then divined the future according to their configurations, similar to runes. Now, the practice of feng shui is more accurately described by the term terrestrial astrology. And that leads us to astrology, which has also been the basis of sacred geographies in other parts of the world. Now, a writing in Sacred Geography of the Ancient Greeks, Jean Ricker says, the evidence of monuments show in an undeniable way, but not yet clearly perceived, that during the more than 2,000 years, the Phoenicians, the Hittites, the ancient Greeks, and the Etruscans, the Carthaginians, and the Romans had patiently woven a fabric of correspondences between the sky, especially the apparent course of the sun through the zodiac, and the inhabited earth, and the cities built by humanity. Now, in his extensively researched books, Ricker presents diagrams of immense astrological zodiacs overlaid on the mainland and islands of Greece, with central points at such sacred sites as the Parthenon in Athens, the oracle shrines of Delphi and Siwa, and the island of Delos. Here's the Parthenon, we missed that. So these sacred sites have all have zodiacal connections over a 2,000-year period. And in Delos, which we're looking at here, the zodiacs extend across the lands and sea, passing through numerous important pilgrimage centers of great antiquity. Now, the architects of these vast terrestrial zodiacs were geniuses, to say the least. But they actually made the country a living image of the heavens, something that we really can't understand in the life we're living now because it's not part of it. Think of astrology, and you usually think pseudoscience, or tarot cards, or some other fraudulent science. But this is, in fact, the most important encoded sacred geography in our ancient history. And while the knowledge of how people originally used these great landscape temples is long forgotten, the location of many of the individual sacred sites comprising the zodiac are still known, and it has only been recently uncovered their true meaning. Now, other sacred geographies, and some of the most intriguing, have their basis in geodesy, which is a branch of applied mathematics. Geodesy is concerned with the magnitude and figure of the Earth and the location of points on Earth's surface. Some of these sites are the most unexplainable in many different aspects of mathematics. Now, the early Egyptians were masters of this science. The prime longitudinal meridian of pre-dynastic Egypt was laid out to bisect the country precisely in half. Passing from the city of Bedet on the Mediterranean coast through an island in the Nile near the Great Pyramid, all the way to where it crossed the Nile again at the Second Cataract. Cities and ceremonial centers were purposely constructed at distances precisely measured from this sacred longitudinal line. And at each of these geodetic centers, a stone marker called an omphalos, sometimes translated as navel of the earth, was placed in a temple and marked with meridians and parallels, showing the directions and distances to other sacred sites. Writing of the practice of geodesy in ancient Greece, Robert Temple tells us the oracle centers in eastern Mediterranean region were, and as I quote, "These temples seem at casual glance to be dotted around apparently at random. However, there is actually a pattern in their distribution which indicates a highly advanced science of geography in ancient times. The oracle centers of Dodona, Delphi, Delos, Cythera, Knossos, and Cyprus are linked as a series. They are all separated from Egypt by a degree of latitude and are integral degrees of latitude from Behet in Egypt. It's extraordinary that if you place a compass point on Thebes in Egypt, you can draw an arc through both Dodona and Metsamor. The fact is that an equilateral triangle is formed by the lines joining Thebes with Mount Dodona and Mount Ararat. These facts cannot possibly be an accident." And they certainly are not an accident. We also find tantalizing evidence of ancient landscape geometries in France, Germany, in England, and in the Languedoc region of southern France. For example, preliminary research has revealed a complex arrangement of pentagons and pentacles, as well as circles and hexagons, and grid lines laid out over some 40 square miles of territory. These are all situated around a naturally, yet mysteriously a mathematically perfect pentagram of 5 mountain peaks. Ancient builders erected a vast landscape temple whose component parts were precisely positioned according to the arcane knowledge of sacred geometry. And you're looking at some of those pentacles mapped. In both England and Germany, many researchers have found extensive evidence of another form of sacred geography, this being the linear arrangement of ancient sacred sites over long distances. The English lines, more so than the German, are particularly well known. Now, the British antiquarian Alfred Watkins with the publication of Old Straight Track in 1925, first brought them to modern attention. For many years, Watkins had trekked across the English countryside, visiting and photographing prehistoric sites such as mounds, standing stones, rock cairns. His habit was to mark on detailed topographic maps the location of the sites he had visited. Now, gazing at his maps one day in 1921, he noticed that many of the sites were situated on alignments that stretched for miles across the countryside. He called these alignments ley lines. Watkins conjectured that he had found the remnants of a vast system of traders' tracks constructed in Neolithic times. Archaeological dating has since confirmed the Neolithic origin of these lines, but has disproved the notion that the lines were used for transportation purposes. Crazy, because the lines run arrow straight across the land, making them impractical for transportation use. Now we're about to get to a mind-blowing similarity here in America. Now, since Watkins' initial research, many more of these lines have been found. Researchers found so many landscape lines in Britain linking both ancient sacred sites and pre-Reformation churches, which were themselves very often situated at places of known pre-Christian sanctity. So once again, we're seeing structures built on top of the foundations of other structures, and in this case, all along sacred geography alignments called ley lines. Now, the purpose and extent of the lines remains a mystery, no matter what you heard on the YouTubes. In his later years, Watkins stopped using the term ley lines, preferring instead to call the landscape markings simply straight tracks. You see, the term ley line has stuck, unfortunately, and has come to mean something quite different than what Watkins originally conceived. Also, the so-called New Age movement incorrectly uses the term. Ley lines, according to New Agers, are said to be paths of energy running across the surface of the earth. Watkins, however, never described ley lines in this way. Yet even though Watkins himself did not speak of ley lines as being energy lines, there actually is some sort of energy or force flowing along the lines. Dowsers and other people with particularly keen sensitivities to Earth's energies have noted this throughout the British Isles, as well as many other places around the world. So what's going on? Well, the answer is that we don't know. And in this brief discussion of sacred geographies, we must also consider the enigma of the straight lines left on the landscape by other archaic cultures, especially in the Western Hemisphere. Examples include, but not limited to, the Nazca lines, which we're looking at here. The Nazca lines are some of the most famous sacred geographies on Earth. And they are similar to, but not dissimilar to, the Altiplano lines, which many interpret as a system of cultivation and water storage in antiquity. So we have the Nazca lines in Peru, straight lines that run all over the place with geoglyphs on top of them, and we have the Altiplano deserts of western Bolivia with endless amounts of circles and straight lines. And then it gets even crazier. The extensive linear markings left by the Anasazi, known as Chaco roads. And these roads emanate far from the vicinity of Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. But just like the ley lines in England, They're perfectly straight and unexplainable. Now, mystified as to the origin and purpose of the Chaco lines, mainstream archaeology interprets them as ancient trader tracks, just like the bad ideas in England. But this explanation is again untenable. The lines do not follow natural contours of the terrain, but rather run straight across the land, often going straight up the face of vertical cliffs, making them completely unsuitable for transportation of either people or supplies. That's not what they were for. Furthermore, terrain-specific roads and tracks dating from the same period as the straight lines have been found and exist alongside them, thus undermining the explanation that the Chacoan straight lines are used for transportation. They're not. Now, the English earth mystery writer Paul Devereux has put forth an interesting interpretation of the straight lines at Chaco, which you're looking at here, and even other places that they are found around the world, including the ley lines. He suggests they may be spirit lines, markings left upon the surface of the earth to represent the spirit journeys or magical flights and out-of-body experiences of ancient shamans. The lines are thus the physical correlation of the roots of shamanic flight in the spirit landscape. Well, this may answer a few questions, especially about the mound builders. In central and eastern United States, the mound building cultures built some of the largest earthworks on planet Earth, the largest known being Serpent Mound, which we've recently done a video on over at our other channel, Magnetic Reversal News. Here you're looking at the Milford earthworks, estimated to be about 1,700 years old, and created by a fraudulent people called the Hopewell, but that wasn't their name. That was simply given to them by archaeologists. And these very well may be the Algonquin people that have been here forever, that have been renamed by archaeologists, the Adena and the Fort Ancient and the Hopewell, when in fact they're actually the same culture that's been here the whole time. Now, the Milford earthworks is representing a cometary airburst over this region at the same time. So they were preserving the sacred geography in perpetuity with this earthwork. They had the direction the comet came in, and many other unexplainable features in the earthwork that are now missing. Thousands of these earthworks have been plowed under and destroyed. And many of the videos on this channel will be about these earthworks, one at a time, to explain the archaeoastronomy and potential significance of the geography of the earthwork. But once again, the only way you can see this earthwork is from above. And there were no airplanes 2,000 years ago. But there were ley lines all over the world, which we just heard may be astral traveling from shamanic people. And if they were astral traveling, they'd be able to see these earthworks in their motions. I know it's a bit creepy. But just the fact that the Hopewell ceremonial earthworks are so difficult to understand and yet so geometrically specific and purposeful, we will never know what these people knew. And that's unfortunate. This information has been lost. And what do we say about Göbekli Tepe or any of the other 12,000-year temple complexes in Turkey, which have only recently been excavated? There's estimated to be hundreds, if not thousands, of these sites on a single hill, all with advanced archaeoastronomical significance, which will take eons to unravel. The research on this channel will be endless. and we'll delve into all the topics one at a time as we unravel the hidden history of the sacred geographies around the world and potentially their meanings. That's boom to knowledge. Hope you got something out of the video. We've only touched the tip of the iceberg. There is no way I could have put a comprehensive introductory vlog like this together with all of the known sacred geographies. There's just far too many to cover. But what you should glean from this short 30-minute presentation is that they extend deep back into antiquity, all the way back possibly to pre-Diluvian times. We didn't talk about any of the cave paintings at Lascaux or Chevet, but we'll get to that. One sacred geography at a time. Be safe. We love you. Subscribe if you haven't, and share this with like-minded people.